Hi, welcome to my channel where I talk about things that interest me because that's all I do all the time. I was very sick last week and may never complete 2 consecutive uploads ever again. To keep this intro short, this is a world languages tier list. It's not objective in any way, it's just whether or not I like the language. I have very little experience with a few of these languages, and I'll mention that when I get to them, and then I'll just grade them on how nice they sound or something, I don't know. So lastly, a few languages that are strangely absent from this list are Bengali, Punjabi, Turkish, and Tagalog. I have no knowledge whatsoever of these languages and have barely even heard them spoken, so while they're pretty large in terms of having many people speaking them, this list would lose its already small amount of credibility if I straight up was just guessing on a few of them. So this is basically just going to be last week's video on crack. This is in alphabetical order, so we're going to start with Arabic. This is the Egyptian flag. It's Egyptian Arabic because that has the most speakers. And I'm going to put Arabic in the... we'll put it in A for now. We'll put it in B. And here's why. I love the sound of Arabic. It has such a great, smooth, flowing sound to it. All of the syllables are really interesting, and like the general sound and the phonetics of the language are interesting as well. But the writing system is so prohibitively difficult to learn that it makes it hard as somebody who speaks English, which is completely disconnected from Arabic in all ways. As somebody coming from English, it makes it very difficult for me to actually learn the language. I have tried like 3 times to get into Arabic and to do some Arabic studies. It's just like so the writing system is just so difficult, so I can't put it above B, but it is a pretty good language. I don't have like any big issues with it other than that. Chinese. Y'all know how I feel about Chinese. It's got a really complex writing system. It's got a really like brutal phonetic system, being that it's completely pitch accent reliant. I am basically afraid of Chinese in all facets, but there's no F tier here because every language that's on this list is like super refined and, you know, spoken by a ton of people. Very impactful. So I'm not going to put anything in F tier, but like if you know, zooming into the scale of this exact tier list, I'm going to put Chinese towards the bottom. English. I put the US flag here. I was going to initially have like a US British Australian mix. Sorry, Canada, but that did not fit well into this. So this is just the American flag. English, I've said it's pretty up there. I'm going to give it an A because of the things I said last week. It's pretty decent. It's fine. It's got an amazing vocabulary. Everything else is just is really solid and good, but it doesn't have any like fatal flaws, except for the fact that rules are like rarely followed in English. But that's something that I think a lot of other languages have an issue with as well. So it's not going to put it below a lot of languages. French. I really like French as well. It sounds awesome. I think the grammar is amazing. The grammar in French is so cool. Coming from an English speaker, it is like so interesting to start like looking into French and being like, oh wow, you know, like like je vais aller à Paris. I am going to go to Paris. It is literally translated, I am going to go. I mean, in Paris, you know, however you want to translate but like, yeah, like that's an incredible grammar structure coming from an English language background. It's so wild. I'm going to put it next to English just because it sounds good. It's got a decent vocabulary. The grammar's awesome. And I don't know, baguettes are pretty good. If you go to a good bread store. I'd really just call it a bread store. Shit. German is actually my, ist meine erste Fremdsprache. It's my first foreign language that I started studying. This is kind of what got me into languages in general. And it's not actually going to be up in the A tier, I don't think, with the French and English, just because while the grammar is really complex, it does have a lot of, you know, info in every word, but like there is a ridiculous amount of unnecessary conjugation and declension and all kinds of other stuff going on. Like I've made the joke several times that I have to get out a TI-84 calculator just to like put a sentence together in German, because for some reason the entire sentence is like declined and conjugated and taken apart and put back together just depending on the gender of a word or a person who is speaking, and it's just kind of ridiculous. It's way too much. Overall, it sounds cool though. It doesn't sound as good as Arabic, and I'm gonna put it below Arabic, just because it doesn't sound nearly as cool as Arabic, in my opinion. But it is a pretty solid language. It's in the B tier. This is the Indian flag. I've got it for Hindi. I know very little about Hindi. This is one of the ones that I'm literally just going to be judging on how it sounds, which means it gets a B. And it's going to go, it's like right here with German. So it could go on either side of German. But I'm just going to, I'm going to put it here because I have more sentimental attachment to German. But both of them are very good in this section here. Italian, I do have a pretty good background with. It's probably a 4th or 5th in this language that I actually understand like a little bit of. I've done a decent amount of Italian stuff, and it's also very similar to English, in terms of like comparatively to a lot of these languages. So I understand a lot of it. I would say that the Italian is one of those languages that like doesn't translate very well from English in terms of like grammar and stuff like that, as well as maybe like French or German would. French and German like are really easy to pick up as an English speaker in terms of like grammar, in my opinion, personally, from my experience. Italian is like Italian and Spanish and stuff like that, and Portuguese have that like weird, there's something a little off in the way they use of in a lot of situations, and the way that they use the too much, which French also does as well, but it's just a little bit much for me. And so I'm going to put Italian at a C, also because I don't think it sounds as cool as Hindi or German. Japanese is a language that I also have a decent amount of study with. I have a year in college and a lot of input. I was actually just listening to the Mazarashi album, the Memento Mori. And so I'm going to put Japanese up here in A, below French, because while the grammar is like, there's nothing like incredible that, it doesn't have plurals in the proper sense. It doesn't have proper future tense. I am not a big fan of a lot of those things. It does sound cool though. And its character system is, while too complicated for its own good, pretty freaking cool looking. So I'm going to put Japanese in the A category. Korean is another language that I don't have very much experience with. I used to be able to read Korean. I cannot read Korean anymore. Same with Russian. I used to be able to read both Korean and Russian. I can't read either of them anymore. Not even like a couple characters of Korean. Like, it's all gone. I'd say that it sounds freaking cool. I really like the fact that when you're romanizing the alphabet, the whole like 1J makes the Y sound, but 2Js makes the J sound kind of thing, and the really interesting way that the language is romanized. I'm gonna put it in the C category, not because I have a problem with the way it sounds or the grammar, because I don't understand the grammar very well, but just because it's really unremarkable when compared to something like Arabic that sounds like super dope, or Japanese that like completely developed on its own and has like basically no outside influence up until like a few hundred years ago. Portuguese, I have Brazilian Portuguese here. I don't have Portuguese here because I have Castilian and Mexican Spanish here, because I feel like that's an important distinction. I have no clue what's going on with European Portuguese. I literally have no clue what it even sounds like. But I've learned a little bit of Brazilian Portuguese, and it's in the same boat with Italian, I think. It sounds okay. It's not particularly good or bad sounding. It's not too complex to learn from any of the nearby languages in terms of like genealogy. I'm putting it in C category because because the fact that the definite articles in Portuguese are o and a is disgusting. That's so, stick to the plan. Everybody else in the Romance languages uses la, le, lo, il, and they keep all the L's there in their definite articles. Portuguese just completely breaks that off, and I'm gonna keep it real. This is getting kind of personal. I've been studying Portuguese for like 2 weeks, and I still mess up the whole o, like o menino, meaning the boy and not a boy. I do that all the time still, and I'm mad about it. And so that's why Portuguese gets a C. Russian, another one I don't know much about. I know that articles and like to be verbs are like different. They're like absent in a lot of places. I know that, I mean, I used to be able to read Russian. I can read like half the characters now, because obviously a lot of the characters like overlap with English. And I know a lot of the other ones as well. It sounds okay. A lot of people like the way it sounds. I don't particularly like the way it sounds. So I'm gonna put it, it's not as good as, I'm gonna put it above Portuguese and below Italian in my eyes. Okay, Castilian Spanish. This is this is gonna be kind of harsh, because I, being American, am extremely partial to Mexican Spanish. I have heard it all around me as I grew up. It's when I go to learn Spanish in school or whatever, it is going to be Mexican Spanish. Also, I hate the dentalization of the like C sound in the middle of words, right? Like hacer instead of hacer. I hate that so much. It's personal. So it's going to be going above Chinese, but in the D tier. And now to Mexican Spanish, I'm borderline, like I think it's like borderline S and A tier. I'm gonna put in the A tier because I don't think there's an entire tier gap above English and French to justify putting Mexican Spanish in the S tier. But Mexican Spanish is basically just like a lot of the good things out of the Latin and the Romance-based languages, and then like a ton of influence from English as well, which it's starting to pick up a lot of the things that are like super unique and cool about English, like the weird vocabulary and stuff like that, especially because like if you get to like the south areas, the southern portion of the United States and like the northern portion of Mexico, where English and Spanish just blend, like Spanglish is awesome. And I think it's right up there, and I would put it I would put it here. I would put it like 80% overlapped with English, but this is going to be my final tier list. There's nothing personal about any of the languages here that are on the lower section except for Brazilian and Castilian Spanish. Just because of a couple phonetics things and grammatical things. And there's nothing like that is inherently better about these languages than these languages, to the extent that it's going to like put a huge tier gap between these. I'd say if you were to look at a graph of how much I like all these languages, there would be from like 0 to 100%. 0% I don't like them at all. 100% I perfectly love them, everything about them. They'd all be gathered together in like a 3% range, with Chinese about 5% below it. But none of them are like S tier, you know? I feel like there's still a lot of weird gaps and issues that doing something like creating a language, like people are trying to create an entirely Germanic version of English that takes away all the French words and all the Latin words and stuff like that, right? I think that that's a really interesting idea, but I think any language that is in the modern day is a world language is going to have so much outside influence that it's just going to be botched in so many ways that it's going to make it super difficult to call one of these languages S tier, like it's only got a couple issues, because all these languages have lots of issues. But again, first year or second year linguistics student who has only studied 2 of these languages in traditional higher education. So I'm not the authority on this. I just thought that was interesting. I've been seeing a lot of tier lists, and I thought I'd make one of my own, and I thought this is the perfect thing for me to make a tier list on. So, all right, that's all. Thanks for watching.